Some demons don't grow horns, they grow smiles.
Everyone loved Nkuru. From the moment he stepped into the market, heads turned. Women adjusted their scarves. Men straightened their shoulders. Children ran toward him shouting his name. He was tall, dark, broad, and carried himself like royalty. His smile was slow and confident, the kind that made people feel chosen. He never raised his voice in public. He greeted elders respectfully. He paid for strangers' food when they were short of money. If someone was sick, Nkuru would be the first to visit with fruits in his hands. People said, "That man has a golden heart." No one imagined that gold could hide rust underneath. When he married Adaeze, the town celebrated like it was a festival. Drums echoed through the night. Women danced around her, whispering, "You are blessed. That man will worship the ground you walk on." Adaeze believed them. On their wedding night, she sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, not from fear, but from excitement. She had married the most admired man in town. What could go wrong? Nkuru entered the room slowly and locked the door behind him. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have. His smile faded, not completely, just enough to feel different, cold, distant. Adaeze barely had time to speak before the first slap landed across her face. The sound echoed against the walls. She stared at him in shock, waiting for a laughter, waiting for an apology, waiting for him to say it was a joke. But Nkuru did not laugh. He grabbed her arm tightly and whispered, "Don't scream." There was no anger in his eyes, no drunken rage, only calm. That was the terrifying part. When it was over, he adjusted his clothes, looked at her swollen face, and gently brushed her cheek like a loving husband. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "you will smile." And she did. The next morning, Nkuru walked through town with Adaeze by his side. He held her hand proudly. People admired them. She wore long sleeves despite the heat. When someone asked about the faint mark near her jaw, she smiled and said she had slipped in the bathroom. Nkuru squeezed her hand lightly. A warning. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into a pattern. Every time Nkuru desired closeness, the ritual came first. No argument, no provocation, just the door locking and the calm expression on his face. Adaeze learned to read the signs, the way he would remove his wristwatch slowly, the way he would roll his shoulders once before turning toward her. Outside, he was a hero. Inside, he became someone else. One evening, after another silent dinner, Adaeze gathered courage. "Why?" she whispered. Nkuru looked at her with confusion, as if she had asked something foolish. "Because I can," he replied calmly. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a breath. "And no one will believe you." The words hit harder than any slap, and deep down, Adaeze knew he was right. The town didn't love the real Nkuru, they loved the mask. That night, Adaeze lay awake long after Nkuru slept peacefully beside her. He slept like a child, calm, breath steady, one arm resting casually over his chest, as if he had done nothing at all. But Adaeze's body ached. Her ribs throbbed with every breath. Her lip was split. Her heart felt heavier than her bruises. And what hurt most was not the pain. It was the silence. The next morning, Nkuru rose early and prepared for the market. Before leaving, he placed money on the table. "For food," he said gently. The same gentle voice that terrified her. When he stepped outside, neighbors greeted him warmly. "Nkuru, our pride, you are blessed with such a beautiful wife." He laughed humbly, playing the role perfectly. Inside the house, Adaeze stared at her reflection. Her eyes no longer sparkled. She practiced smiling in the mirror until it looked real enough, because when he returned, she had to look happy. Weeks passed, the ritual continued, But something began to change inside Adaize. Fear slowly turned into awareness. She noticed that Onkuru was not losing control when he hurt her. He was in control. Every movement was measured, every strike calculated, every whisper deliberate. He didn't beat her out of anger. He beat her to feel powerful. One evening, during a family gathering, Nkuru's mother pulled Adaize aside. "My son is a good man," she said proudly. "Take care of him. Men like him are rare." Adaize forced a nod. Rare. Yes, he was rare. Rare in the worst way. That night, Onkuru locked the bedroom door again. Adaize's heart pounded, but something inside her refused to tremble this time. When he lifted his hand, she didn't beg. She looked directly into his eyes. For the first time, she saw something flicker there. Not guilt, not anger, but excitement. He enjoyed her fear. And when she didn't show it, he struck harder. Afterward, as she lay on the cold floor, she realized something terrifying. The town would never save her. Her family would not believe her, and Onkuru would never stop until she did something. The next morning, she walked to the market slowly, covering her bruises with a scarf. As she passed groups of women praising Onkuru, her ears rang. "If only my husband was like him. He is too calm to ever hurt a fly." Adaize almost laughed. Almost. That afternoon, she quietly began hiding small amounts of money from the food allowance Onkuru gave her. Just coins at first, then more. She wasn't sure what she would do yet, but for the first time in months, she felt something new. Not hope, not strength, but a plan forming in silence. And sometimes, silence is where survival begins.
Weeks passed, and Adaize's small acts of rebellion grew bolder. Coins hidden in old jars, receipts tucked beneath floorboards. Each tiny secret was a thread she was weaving into a plan. She wasn't yet ready to act, but she could feel her control returning in small ways. Then, Nkuru did the unthinkable. He returned from a trip to the city with a woman, young, confident, and dressed in a striking deep red gown that contrasted sharply with Adaize's muted cream. Her eyes were sharp, almost predatory, and she carried herself like someone who had learned to command attention and obedience without raising a hand. "I'd like you to meet my new wife," Nkuru said casually, as if introducing a trophy rather than a human being. Adaize's stomach twisted. The woman's gaze was calm, deliberate. There was no trembling, no fear. Chioma, as Nkuru called her, knew exactly who she was facing. After a brief cold smile exchanged between Nkuru and his mother, he gestured toward the red-clad woman. "Come," he said to Chioma, "let's settle in." Adaize watched, heart hammering, as Nkuru proudly led the second wife to his room, just as he had forced her own steps months ago. The polished floor reflected the warm glow of lanterns, but there was no warmth here, only the dread she had known too well. The door closed behind them. Silence fell. Nkuru turned toward Chioma, eyes darkening. His charming facade vanished. His lips curled in anticipation. He reached for her arm, his breath steady, calculating. She didn't flinch. She didn't plead. And when he raised his hand, ready to beat her, something terrifying happened. His arm froze mid-air. His fingers twitched, but they would not bend. His wrist locked. His legs quivered beneath him, yet he could not step closer. His chest heaved, but the calm control he always had, his monster mask, was gone. Chioma's eyes, sharp and unyielding, glimmered in the moonlight. Her crimson gown flowed around her like liquid fire, but her presence was terrifyingly still and commanding. She didn't speak, she didn't move, and yet the house seemed to obey her will. Nkuru struggled, a strangled whisper escaping his throat. He tried to force himself forward to dominate her as he had every other woman, but his body betrayed him. Adaize, hidden just outside the slightly ajar door, felt a shiver run down her spine. This was no ordinary woman. Chioma's power, dark, silent and absolute, was something Nkuru had never faced. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. He could do nothing. Not a step, not a strike, not even a breath without effort. Finally, he slumped against the wall, eyes wide with disbelief, trembling like a man seeing death before it touches him. Chioma stood tall, eyes unwavering, heart steady. She whispered softly, barely audible, "I will not fear. Not you. Not anyone." In that moment, Nkuru realized his control, his pleasure in fear, his dominance over women was not unshakable, not when faced with someone like her. And Adaize, watching from the shadows, felt something stir deep inside her, hope and a dangerous curiosity. The next morning, Nkuru sat alone in the dim light of his study. The house was silent, but inside his mind a storm raged. Every shadow seemed heavier, every whisper of the walls sharper. He replayed the night over and over, Chioma standing there, unafraid, untouched, unmoved by his hand, his anger, his control. How could a woman, any woman, possess such power? How could she bend the very air around him, freeze his body, strip him of the dominance he had wielded over countless women before? The thought gnawed at him, a fear that did not exist in his life until now. Unable to bear it, Nkuru rose and sought the one person he believed could explain the impossible, his father. Baba's house was quiet, filled with the scent of incense and the heavy weight of old spirits. Nkuru knelt, voice low and trembling. "Baba, there is a woman in my house," he whispered. She has strange power. She did not allow me to beat her before taking her. What is happening? How could she hold me like that?" Baba's eyes darkened, glowing faintly in the flickering lamplight. He leaned forward, voice deep, slow, deliberate, each word a shadow that wrapped around Nkuru's chest. "Nkuru, your life is about to change. The woman you speak of, she is no ordinary mortal. She was sent from the spirit world, an emissary of balance, of protection. The spirit of sin and grace, they have marked her. Her power exists to guard what is sacred, to protect your wife, to judge men like you." Nkuru swallowed, throat dry. His mind raced, trying to dismiss it, but every instinct, every flicker of memory reminded him of the truth. She had done what no other could. She had held him down without touch, without force, without mercy. Baba's voice grew softer, colder, almost a hiss against the shadows. "Mark my words, my son. The house you rule will no longer be yours. The woman you tried to break is a storm you cannot weather. And if you try, if you dare to strike, the spirits will strike back. The power in her blood is older than you. It is justice incarnate, and it will not forgive." Nkuru felt a chill crawl up his spine, a darkness settling in the pit of his stomach. Fear, pure, raw, unfamiliar, crept into the corners of his mind. He had ruled through fear all his life, but now he was the one trembling. Outside, the wind howled through the courtyard. The house seemed alive, whispering secrets only he could hear. Nkuru realized with a sickening certainty that nothing in his world would ever be the same again. And in the shadows of that moment, one truth burned brighter than all else. Chioma was not just a wife. She was a force, older and darker than he could ever imagine. Nkuru returned from Baba's shrine a different man. Not calmer, not wiser, not stronger. Haunted. Every small sound inside the house made him turn sharply. A faint movement in the hallway tightened his chest. Even the quiet presence of Adeze unsettled him. He tried to dismiss Baba's words. A spirit sent to protect your wife. Impossible. And yet his body remembered the paralysis, the humiliation, the fear. That night he locked himself inside his study and drank until the room felt smaller. Sweat gathered on his temples as he stared into the darkness. "What are you?" he muttered. Upstairs, Chioma stood by the window, gazing into the courtyard. She already knew. He had gone to Baba, and Baba had spoken. Soon, the house began to change. Footsteps echoed behind Nkuru, but when he turned, no one was there. Doors he was certain he locked creaked open by morning. Objects he arranged carefully shifted overnight. The silence was no longer empty. It was watching. One evening, as he passed the hallway mirror, something stopped him cold. For a brief second, he saw himself standing behind Chioma, raising his hand. But in the reflection, his hand was gone, completely missing. He spun around. Nothing. Just stillness. From above, a faint movement on the balcony. Chioma had seen everything. That night, she finally spoke. "You went to Baba." Her voice was calm, certain. His heartbeat quickened. "How do you seek answers about power," she said, stepping closer. "But you never questioned your cruelty." Her eyes did not waver. "For years you fed on fear. You believed it made you untouchable." She leaned slightly forward. "But fear is a spirit too, and spirits demand balance." Nkuru tried to lift his hand. It trembled, then froze, suspended midair. "You cannot harm what you cannot control," she whispered. And for the first time in his life, Nkuru stepped back. Adeze had been silent for years, but silence can be preparation. Later that night, she entered Chioma's room. They stood facing each other, not as rivals, but as women who understood something deeper. "I have been waiting for someone like you," Adeze said quietly. "You are stronger than you think," Chioma replied. There were no tears in Adeze's eyes, only awakening. Together, they lifted the hidden floorboard. Coins, records, carefully kept proof of years of manipulation and intimidation. They would not run. They would not beg. They would dismantle him, piece by piece. Sleep abandoned Nkuru after that. The house felt tighter each night, as though the walls were closing in. He dreamt of fire, of shadows standing behind Chioma, of Baba's voice echoing through darkness. Justice incarnate. He woke up screaming. When he stepped into the hallway, his breath caught in his throat. Both women stood at the far end, side by side, not angry, not afraid, watching, waiting. And in that long, suffocating silence, Nkuru understood something he had never imagined. He was no longer the hunter, he was the offering. Nkuru stopped going to the market. He stopped attending meetings, stopped answering calls. The man who once filled every space with confidence began to withdraw from the very people who admired him. His steps grew slower, his eyes restless. The charm that once came so naturally now felt forced, fragile. Whispers began to move quietly through the village. "Have you noticed? He doesn't greet like before. They say something is wrong." Inside the house, the air felt thick, almost visible like smoke that refused to clear. That evening, dinner was served in silence. Adiaze moved calmly, her face unreadable. Chioma sat quietly, observing. Nkoro opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came out. He cleared his throat and tried again. His voice cracked. The man who once commanded attention with a single word could barely hold his own sound together. And somewhere deep inside him, he knew. The king was losing his voice. Soon, a village meeting was called. Nkoro had no choice but to attend. He stood before the people who once praised him, lifting his chin as though confidence alone could restore what was slipping away. But when he began to speak, his hands betrayed him. They trembled. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. An elder stepped forward, his expression grave. For years, the elder began slowly. There have been complaints. The words settled heavily over the crowd. Records were presented. Reports were read aloud. Witness statements surfaced one by one. Financial misconduct, threats made in private, abuse hidden behind authority. Nkoro turned, searching the faces before him. He expected loyalty. He expected defense. He found silence. Not one voice rose for him. At the edge of the gathering, Chioma stood still, watching. She did not interrupt. She did not smile. She simply observed. Then Adiaze stepped forward. Her voice was steady. "I endured in silence," she said, "but silence is not loyalty." A wave of shock passed through the crowd. She spoke of intimidation, of manipulation, of the quiet ways fear had ruled their home. The truth unfolded slowly, mercilessly. Nkoro felt his knees weaken. The smile that once softened hearts now appeared empty. He searched desperately for sympathy in the eyes around him. He found none. The council reached its decision. Nkoro was stripped of his title, stripped of his authority, stripped of his influence. Publicly. The same crowd that once admired him now watched without emotion as his power dissolved. He walked home alone. No greetings, no admiration, no whispered praise. Only silence followed him. When he entered the compound, he found both women seated calmly. They were not celebrating, not mocking, just peaceful. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter, as though something heavy had finally been lifted from its walls. Nkoro stood in the center of the room and looked at them. "Was this your plan?" he asked, his voice no longer strong enough to hide behind. Chioma answered softly, "No." "This was your consequence," Adiaze added. "We didn't destroy you, we stopped protecting you." The words struck deeper than accusation. Nkoro slowly sank into a chair. The prophecy had never been about fire or spirits rising from shadows. It had been about exposure, about the slow unveiling of what he believed would never be seen. And sometimes, the most powerful spirit is not fear, it is truth. The house grew quieter after the council meeting. Nkuru no longer moved like a king. He moved like a man calculating every step. The village that once admired him now watched from a distance. Greetings became short, smiles became forced, invitations stopped coming. For the first time, he felt what others had felt around him for years: isolation. Inside the house, no one argued, no one shouted, but the silence spoke loudly. At night, Nkuru would sit alone, staring into nothing. His mind replayed the council's decision over and over again. The moment his title was stripped away, the moment the crowd looked at him not with admiration, but with disappointment. That look hurt more than any punishment. Days later, he tried to defend himself. "I built that village," he said one evening. "I made it strong." Adiaze looked at him calmly. "You built it on fear." The words landed heavy. Fear had always worked for him. Fear kept people obedient. Fear kept questions away. But fear has an expiration date, and when it expires, truth begins to speak. The evidence that was presented did not lie. The witnesses did not stutter. The silence of the crowd did not defend him. For years, he believed power meant control, but power without integrity is only temporary. When he finally walked through the compound after losing everything, the air felt different. Not tense, not dark. Free. He looked at both women standing in the living room. "Was this your plan?" he asked quietly. "No," came the steady reply. "This was your consequence." That was the moment he understood something he had never allowed himself to see. No one destroyed him. His actions did. And sometimes, the loudest revenge is simply telling the truth. The house did not celebrate his fall, it simply exhaled. Because justice is not noise, justice is balance. Power is not proven by how many people fear you. It is proven by how many people respect you when you are not in the room. If your strength comes from intimidation, it will collapse the day courage walks in. Truth may take time, but when it stands up, even kings must sit down. If this story taught you something, if you believe power should never silence truth, then don't just watch and scroll away. Like this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Nkuru a victim of exposure or a victim of his own actions? And subscribe to this channel for more deep, powerful stories that hit differently. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we reveal consequences. See you in the next one.